on Canada's role. It's true their oversight is hideous. It's never been effective because it was never really thought about. But there's a reason for that. In my experience of the Five Eyes, the Canadian intelligence services were always the least aggressive. They were the least adventurous. They didn't really push the legal boundaries. It was difficult to target Canadians legally and so on and so forth for surveillance. And it wasn't until the recent government, I'm not Canadian, so I might get the names wrong here, I believe it was the Harper government, that things really started to change. And suddenly oversight became more important because they became much more aggressive in a very short period of time. But setting that aside, the broader challenge there that Amy was bringing up was, how do we teach children about this? And this is really difficult because what we're inheriting is we're inheriting a culture here from sort of thousands of years of human progress, of civilization, where the way that we kept people in line was explaining to them that there's an omniscient being somewhere up there above you, whether it's a god, whether it's your lord, whether it's your president or whoever, or the secret police, who know what it is you're doing. And so because of that, you shouldn't do anything bad. Could just be your parents. And that kind of authoritarian mentality is our first step. That's our indoctrination into the culture of human interrelationship at a large scale. Now, something happened with the progress of technology, with the progress of human culture, where we started to see people beginning to challenge power more and more. We began to see the public gaining greater and greater voices in the direction of their governments. We saw sort of an explosion of liberal democracy. And at some point, intelligence services, which is really a euphemism for state security agencies, because they're not really protecting the public, they're protecting the state. They're protecting, when they say national security, what they mean is the institutions of that nation, not really the country and its people particularly. There is a culture within government, and I've seen it sitting in meetings, throughout my career. You see it in briefings, you see it in slides, you see it everywhere, where they go, what can we do, not what should we do? And eventually technology reached the point where, in secret, behind closed doors, without the involvement of the public, the NSA and groups like it realized that, well, while we may not be able to ask God a question about what this person is doing, if you believe in a God, we can build our own. We can create a system that simply watches all of the communications of everyone all the time and files it away. We're not going to look at it all the time, all day long, because we don't have time for all that. But if we ever want to ask God a question, well, he works for us now. And how do you deal with that culturally? How do you make people realize how repugnant that is, when it's very difficult even in most modern societies to even have discussions about that level of disparity in power, almost religious disparities in power? When you're disempowered to a point where, if you wanted to resist, if you wanted to change something, if you really wanted to contest something, you might simply lack the capability, no matter how well organized you are. That's something that, if we don't recognize it, pardon me for speaking a little bit nationalistically here, it's just my culture. If it's not inhuman, it is un-American. And I think the only way that we can start doing that is, again, thinking about our language. Think about how we phrase things. Think about how we communicate. What are the cultures that we're building, that we're passing to our friends? When I was growing up, when I was in school, whenever somebody asked you something or basically threw shade on your activities, they didn't approve of your choices or your language or whatever, we used to say, it's a free country, isn't it? I don't hear that a lot anymore. I don't see that on shows. I don't see that in movies. When our values have begun to fall out of favor in the terms of the way they're communicated, we need to think very hard about, are we losing them? And if we are, how can we reinforce them?